Okay, so I'll do a little housekeeping first. Welcome. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Jacqueline Hanna from FCI, and this is Food Co-op Initiative's FCI Live video series. We're in week 2, and the turnout's been excellent. Thank you guys for coming out. And we will send out just a little feedback survey right after this about this session. It's 2.5 questions long. It really will help us make sure that when we offer the FCI Live series again in the fall, that we're giving you the content you want and you're getting what you need. So if you could fill that out for us, we'd really, really appreciate it. Other quick things, if you're not speaking, please stay muted. Even if you have no noise on your end, it just kind of can sometimes create more warping of the sound. So please do that. We appreciate that. We are recording. Keep that in mind. Not only are we recording, but these will be shared on our YouTube for posterity as of the first week of March. So just keep that in mind as you're sharing. And there will be an email. If you guys are registered, you're getting it coming out tomorrow with the last of our last week sessions. And we have 4 sessions next week instead of 3, some really exciting ones that I'm looking forward to. So be looking for that email and make sure you're registered for the last week of sessions, including a case study from the South Philly Food Co-op who just opened on December 23rd from their GM, which will be really interesting to hear. So without further ado, I want to make sure you have time with the people you actually came here to share time with and to hear the expertise of. So we have with us today Ben Sandel and Winston Estes. I can't say everyone's not the same age, Winston. So Ben Sandel is a board specialist and an owner loan campaign specialist who opened a food co-op and startup food co-op himself. So he has been there as a board member. He knows your road. And Winston is a specialist in project management and operations and has helped many a startup either get open or turn it around when they didn't open so great. So they both have a lot of expertise in the area specifically of startups, not just food co-ops. And they're here today to share their thoughts with you on how things are changing for startup food co-ops since this pandemic has hit and what they're seeing out there. So I'm going to turn it over to them. Thanks to them for being here today.
First. Okay, thank you. Now I'm not muted, I think, for having us here. And yeah, great intro. Couldn't have said it better. Winston, anything you want to add in terms of your role?
No, I think that's really it. I do have a lot of experience in cooperatives, been working on site in retail management or opening retails for more than 25 years, good suffice to say. So I've seen co-ops at all stages of development, and with the exception of, yeah, sometimes developments are not the most positive, but I've seen a lot of growth scenarios. So great. I'm excited to talk to you about opening your co-op and what to prepare for.
And so, you know, I am not operational, but I have been involved in getting a co-op started. And as Jacqueline said, my area of focus is governance and capital. And so between us, we're going to put some ideas out there about how we see the startup world changing, and how our startups might react or respond to that. And I also want to note that like nobody knows exactly where things are going or how things are going to end up. So all of this is work in progress. Things are going to change, but that's part of the bigger message, I think, is becoming more flexible, more willing to pivot as needs change and as opportunities change. So I guess maybe I'll start by talking a little bit about what we see as some of the changes that we're already seeing to some degree and expecting to continue that would affect the development of our new food co-ops. I mean, we all know that the pandemic has been hugely impactful, and even with eventual widespread use of the vaccine, it's not ever going away. It'll recede to the level of a seasonal flu, we hope, but it's going to be around, and some of the effects of it, I think, are going to remain indefinitely. Some people are going to like some of these changes and want them to stay, and we have to take that into account in the design and setup of our design and development of our co-ops. There are varying estimates, but there is no question that we're losing a lot of restaurants during this period. How does that affect us? Well, people get food from there, and especially some people prefer food that's already cooked, or don't have the time or skills, and they're going to need to find that food from somewhere. So our co-ops are potentially a really good option to help satisfy that increased demand that is not being fulfilled as well by restaurants anymore. One thing that we've already seen in existing co-ops is that people are changing their expectations for what safety looks like for both shoppers and staff. And co-ops have been superb, have really been great. I hear over and over again about co-ops being the first in their community to put into place measures to protect staff and shoppers that the other grocery stores in the community either aren't doing, or they're doing half-heartedly, or whatever. But that's another factor we're going to see, this need for businesses to demonstrate their genuine care and concern for health and safety of staff and shoppers. That I think is going to be a much higher factor in how people choose where they shop. I think, and this gets into the maybe a little more theoretical, but there has been, we might say, an erosion of trust in some of the institutions that make up our world, our country in particular. I think people are facing more concern and skepticism about the ability of governmental organizations and big industry, conventional grocery, for instance, to meet their needs and to be trustworthy partners for the needs that we all have. Whereas I think that gives us a great opportunity as co-ops, because people do still trust us more. We are local, we are real people in our communities, starting and running these stores. So that's kind of, from the perspective of, well, and one last piece from my side, and then I'll pass it over to Winston. There have been folks, I'm seeing this with capital campaigns all over the country, and I'm also hearing it from other sources, that from a capital perspective, we don't know what's coming yet, but I think we can pretty much be reasonably sure that there's going to be a substantial amount of money coming into communities for redevelopment, for various stimulus. There will be money. And in addition to that, what I am seeing is that there are people with money who are being activated to put their money into things that make a difference in their communities. And I think food co-ops are a great place for those folks to put their money. And this is money that is coming from across all parts of the political spectrum. We just have to be ready to show that we are the folks to use this money to create more good in our community. So I'll take a step back, hand it over to Winston to talk some about, your side of it.
That is a perfect transition, Ben. Thank you. Be ready. What Ben said. If you walk away from this hour with nothing more than knowing that you need to be ready for opportunity to strike, for a site to come up, for talent to suddenly float your way, for money to be available, we want you to be ready. Have your articles of incorporation set up, have your workflow, your order of operations well identified, know what your next steps are. Once you're incorporated, how are you going to fund your co-op? Do you have your feasibility study? Have you spec'd out your sites? Are you identifying professionals that you are aligned with, that align with you, that you trust, that you admire their vision, their talent. I think be ready is always something that, you know, we think about of like, okay, well, what if something happens? I want to be ready. But get it concrete, write it down. What are the steps that be ready means? Not just be frosty and all amped up. It means you have your underpinnings planned for. You know what you need, you know what your next steps are. When you get that $10,000 grant from whichever source you're approaching, how are you prioritizing those needs? Is it your feasibility study? Is it your business plan? Is it popularizing your effort in your community to gather more people to invest in that effort? Just being really well aligned, knowing that you have good processes at your board level, that your leadership is clear. And the order of operations, I get this question a lot. So I just wanted to go ahead and push it out there of like, you do need your feasibility. Your feasibility will lead to you writing your business plan. And some of these you'll do in parallel because they're linked. But if you have to like prioritize your talent, which, you know, there's a lot of work to be done, and frequently there's not a lot of people to do it. You're not a professional organization necessarily. You're a lot of volunteers with your, you know, heart and soul in this effort. So you do have to prioritize your efforts so that you can move ahead. And like we said, be ready. So you get your feasibility, your business plan, your pro forma, and I think in parallel, you are identifying those professionals that you align with. I think a hazard of the passion and the commitment that we all have to our co-ops and our co-op vision is that we want to do it perfectly. And so I've seen a lot of groups start to just bring in every voice, you know, more information is better, all the different voices. And then at some point you say, well, Winston said this, and Ben said that, and Jacqueline said this, which one is right? Well, which one is right for your organization? And while Jacqueline and Ben and many of our colleagues are fabulously talented and wonderful, you should go ahead and make sure that you're, you know, working with someone consistently so they understand the developments that are happening in your organization. They have the backstory of why maybe you shouldn't have a full service meat department, or why maybe site A doesn't work, but site B is great. So I do think that I say that sort of, it's a scary thing to align with people, but I think it's a really powerful thing too, because you can gather a lot of wisdom and still not make a decision. And part of being ready is knowing what your decisions will be and having a fairly good idea of how your value system informs what your actions are. Because speed is something that co-ops are not known for, but you need to get excited about being fast. And fast means that you're prepared. You know, they say that that's lucky is, I think, preparedness for an opportunity. You know, you're not lucky if you're just standing there and you can't take the opportunity, right? So I think being ready is it's a huge theme, and there's a lot to do to get ready. The other thing I think is, Ben was talking about just trends in our industry. There are different services that people are looking for. And one of the other things, speed again, is speed of transaction equates safety, and making sure that your co-op and your service communicates that it will be a safe environment. Like, safe is a really key component to being a reliable and trusted partner in your community. And it always has been, but it's just amplified. The other thing that I wanted to touch on that Ben mentioned is that there will be money. On the flip side, there's going to be a lot of commercial activity when we get to the post-pandemic era. There's going to be a huge demand for construction services, refrigeration services for all of these goods. And so there will be a lot of money, but there will be a lot of expense. Sometimes you are not going to be able to negotiate for a better price on a service that you absolutely have to have in a timely manner. And to that, I do loop back to make sure you've got some really good professionals working for you that know the fair value, what the lease rates should be, what the construction pricing should be, what the professional service rates should be. Make sure you're getting good advice. You may have to go against that good advice, but at least you have the information.
Great. Jacqueline, should we like take questions and go that way? Or I mean, we can fill up the entire hour ourselves, but we don't want to or don't need to.
We already did in the planning of the conversation this morning. We took about a half an hour and we were thoroughly engaged.
Yes, totally.
So I'd say let's open it up to questions. I think people just didn't know necessarily. So if folks, I think what we're saying is this team wanted to share their broad thoughts and then open the floor. So throw it in the chat, although I do think the room is at just the right size. If somebody wants to unmute and ask a direct question, they can. And if you guys need some warming up, I'll toss them the first question, but let's get you, but I know you guys are not shy, so let's.
And we've got more stuff we can say too, but again, it's not, we don't want to be the ones doing all the talking.
I think you guys were laying out some broad concepts, so people might be saving a lot of their like detailed questions where you get into some of the more of the details. Like I absolutely know the minute Winston opens her mouth about the idea of online ordering, there will be 20 questions. So, so anyone have any questions now about kind of that broad overview of what they're seeing and thinking's coming up, or should we keep on moving? All right. I think folks want you guys to get a little more nitty gritty, and then we'll get the questions flowing. But please keep in mind during this part where they're sharing their thoughts, throw those thoughts and questions in the chat. This is really meant to be interactive. The questions, you know, it isn't like a pre-formulated, like, here's exactly, you know, interact. So throw those questions out there in those comments, and I'm going to turn it back to Winston and Ben.
Okay.
Okay, well, I was, one of the things that I think that the trends that is, I have pretty good confidence it's going to emerge, is that there's going to be an emphasis on prepared foods. As Ben mentioned, many of our restaurants in our local communities have not been able to weather the pandemic challenges, and so the customer has been isolated with only their own cooking. And I'm a pretty good cook, but I'm tired of it, and I want variety. And I also, once I'm able to gather with my friends, I'm going to want to have a lot of time with my friends too. So I believe that the meal kit trend is going to continue to be a very big hotspot. I think that you aligning with your local CSAs and making sure that it's collaborative and that you're both building each other and aligning with each other and potentially co-branding with each other, so that when I go ahead and get my CSA, so that I don't have to be tied to my garden this year, I also am thinking, well, but I'm going to go to the co-op for all of my essentials, my bulk, my grains, my whatnot. I think that there's going to be kind of a snapback to our prepared foods departments, where it's going to be exciting to be able to go to a salad bar, a soup bar, a hot food bar. I'm also expecting bulk to have a pretty good snapback. Already, frozen has absolutely burst. I mean, it was frozen 2 years ago, a year ago was a dead category. I was literally pulling freezers out of stores. Not all, but, you know, taking 17, 20 doors down to 15, 12. That was enough, because our competitors had all of our frozen sales. We really weren't competing very well, but now it's an absolute staple to be able to stock the larder, to put things by and hold things in your freezer in case there was ever to be some sort of sudden food shortage again. So I think that that's going to sustain. And it's odd. Like I said, a year or so ago, 10 doors of frozen is enough. Now you really need to look at how are you planning that. Let's see, refrigerated categories are still very, very popular, and they're going to continue to be. And as Jacqueline peppered me and laid down the seeds, curbside service and do it for me services are going to be very popular. They're already kind of an essential, but I don't think that we're going to be able to get them to fade back. Because why would I want it to fade back is because we're very inefficient at it. It's not a moneymaker. It is absolutely a service that you have to subsidize. And so having a focused version of curbside, figuring that out and making sure that it aligns with your values, Instacart and services like that are considered to be very extractive and unfair to the gig worker. And so just engage with that concept of how could you do that? What does it require? And it requires a lot. It's a really demanding service to provide. I'm building it currently for an organization that's hoping to open their doors soon. And it really is a labor-intensive service to provide, but it's a necessary evil, and it will continue to be.
So I'm going to jump in. Jillian has a question. Hi, Jillian. Which also, so Jillian's asking about, so what does this mean in terms of your market study, especially if you don't necessarily have a firm site, and you are not necessarily at the point with enough ownership and enough resources to truly move ahead, but should you be doing one earlier than later? And yes, I think this is part of the whole be ready aspect of it. From the, building relationships in your community, working in the past, I feel like, and this certainly was how I did it when I was working on our startup here in Harrisonburg, Virginia. As we had a need, we figured out what to do about that need. And I think it's really important to get way more proactive about figuring out what those needs might be in the future and trying to get ready for them now. So, traditionally, or it used to be that market studies were done when you had a couple of specific sites to consider. If you are able to build relationships in your community with local leaders, especially if you have redevelopment organizations in your community, and get a sense of what's the retail rate going for these days? What are they asking for the ever-growing inventory of empty sites that are out there, so that you can plug that in preliminarily, at least, into market study, so you have a sense of what's going on that way. Same thing with building relationships with people like commercial realtors, folks who might be able to clue you in to locations that will be coming available before they go on the market. That can be really helpful. And again, that can also help inform a market study. And yeah, getting a preliminary market study and preliminary pro forma in place so that when opportunities may present themselves, you at least have something already in place that you can plug specific numbers in. And also looking at your own internal organizational capabilities, get to know a pro forma and a market study. There's a lot of learning to do there. Financial literacy may be something to work on within your organization, so that, again, if an opportunity should arrive quickly, you are going to be able to make good decisions faster than we've done in the past, because some of that is going to be, may become important. I've seen 3 instances now where a major grocery store closes in a community and or is on the verge of closing, and there's been an effort to try to reopen it as a cooperative, either by a startup or an existing co-op. One of those has been successful, and I think it's a great, hugely successful, great model to go with. The other 2 were not primarily because of how long it took the co-op to put together their package, to potentially take that site and continue operating that grocery store, but as a cooperative. So yeah, that be ready piece. And let me glance at Julian's thing. I don't have a lot of advice on how you can save money on stuff. Although, again, as you build relationships with folks, both locally and nationally in the co-op world, check and see. I think when things begin to break loose, when there will be some tipping point at which point people begin to feel okay with travel and okay with moving around in their community more so than they do right now. And when that happens, a lot of professionals in various fields are going to be in super high demand. So perhaps you could talk to the market study people today and say, hey, what can you do remotely? And what's your availability like? And if your availability, like if you have availability now, if we were willing to use you today instead of waiting 6 months, could we get any discount? I can't say that you will or won't, but I think it's worth looking at how absolutely everything you can get lined up now when theoretically demand may be a little lower and will benefit you as opportunities arise. And it may mean some of us having to do informal, oh yeah, sorry, go ahead, Winston.
I was just going to tag on to what you're saying.
Yeah.
Those conversations also just ask what the going rate for updates is. And you might find it's really a competitive and accessible pathway.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, and so it also, and this comes up with a lot of co-ops, pretty much all, I would say, is that some of this stuff you may need to do, kind of some private pre-capital campaign capital development. So if you need to get a market study done, if you need to get some other work done that you really can't do without skilled professionals doing it, like their pro forma work, if you don't have the cash, you may need to take some private loans from within, from board members, from other people within the organization, or even some private loans from within the community. Those are usually just based on promissory notes, so they're not part of a larger campaign. And you could, this was essentially is business principles saying, I'm putting up some of my money so we can move to the next level. Often those early loans will roll into a capital campaign when you have it. So then they'll become a more conventional loan or preferred share purchase or whatever. But yes, you're going to need some money. I am going to let Winston talk about the importance of community gathering spaces. And then I guess I'll come back because there's a question about convictions that money is coming for redevelopment and how we can plan for that. So.
Yeah, I think that community space is important, but it's changed. Community space is more likely on the exterior of your building, in the open, airy parking lot, and any sort of green space that you have near your site, and parking, and people eating in their cars with the company of the one or two other individuals that they feel safe with. Mm-hmm. So your parking lots are probably going to change. I'm certainly expecting that that's the preferred community space that we're going to see use of for the for quite a while.
Winston, come back. Okay, Winston may be experiencing an internet issue. Are other people also seeing that? It's not just me, right?
No, it's not just you. She'll keep you back shortly. I just want to point to Fredericksburg just did this really well. I want to share a bit about how they created that gathering. Oh, there she's back.
Sorry, you froze for a second. Yes, you are now, but you were frozen for a bit.
Did I get to the parking lot?
You were mentioning
the parking lot.
You were mentioning people eating in their cars. Yes. And you're frozen again.
And just frozen again.
Well, I can jump in with a little an observation that I've seen with my co-op here, which is now about 10 years old. What was the seating area inside, the meeting space, where people would have coffees and stuff together. First, it was, of course, removed as a safety precaution, but now that space has been completely filled up as the staging area for curbside delivery, curbside shopping. So there's a freezer there, there's shelves. I think from conventional grocery standards, you might consider it like it's not the most attractive part of the store. And yet it also really clearly demonstrates, there's all these boxes and bags of food with people's name on them, ready that as soon as somebody calls from their car in the parking lot and says, I'm in spot 4 and I'm, Mr. Jones, they go right to this place, which is by the door. They run it out. They put it in, no touch, really great. People love it too. And I do not expect that to go away. I think that some people are finding the convenience to be worth it to them. You think about if you have little kids in car seats, well, do I want to unbuckle them all and it's a cold day and I got to find the mittens and I got to wipe the noses and then I got to get them in the store and corral them, or I could just do it all online and I don't have to unbuckle the kids at all and they'll put the stuff in the back of my car. That kind of stuff is going to remain. So that's one aspect of using that space.
Yeah, I have to piggyback on this and say startups, we're not going to stop harping on you and your parking. I know it's so hard to get adequate parking, and those of you in larger cities, like maybe we can get around that. But I think Winston's right. The outdoor space is going to become a bunch of your community space. So don't look for that pressure to go away.
Yes, totally. And keep in mind that if you are at a parking deficit or if you have a challenging parking situation, you will most likely have to make that up with additional labor. So it's going to cost you one way or another. It's just how life is.
You've got one on capital stock. I wondered if you could jump to, Ben.
Sure. Yes. I love capital stock. Capital stock is also sometimes called preferred shares or C shares, or you can call it almost anything you want. It is non-voting stock. These are shares that don't give you any additional control over the organization. You don't get another vote for it. Usually, not everywhere, but most of the time they're restricted to, you can only sell them to owners of your co-op within your own state. There are some variations there. And they show up as equity on your balance sheet. So that is where I see there's two big advantages of using preferred shares or C shares or capital stock is that they don't show up as debt and they give more control to the cooperative because they don't have payback dates associated with them. There's usually, it is stated in your materials that there should be no expectation of any redemption of these shares before a certain number of years. But unlike loans, where you're going to have a specific date, and if you go past that date, you better renegotiate the loan or you are now in default to your co-op lender. Preferred shares can be, I don't want to say perpetual, but there is not a set end date. The co-op has more control. Someone can say, hey, I'd like my money back. And the co-op can say, well, we budgeted a certain amount per year. We're going to put you in the queue. And when we are financially able, we will do that for you. So it puts more control in the hands of the co-op, shows up as equity, which is always a positive thing rather than debt. It may take a little more, you definitely have to use a lawyer to set up these programs. So make sure you abide. One thing that I'm encountering right now, that Illinois has apparently a 10 share limit. So if you're using preferred shares, that is a very challenging restriction. And you want to know that going in. I feel like that, a lot of co-ops will reorient around member loans in order to get past that rather onerous restriction. So check with your lawyer, see what your state's requirements are. I love preferred shares and I would say I prefer them, which is kind of whatever. C shares, investment shares, but they are not always, the thing to do if your state doesn't allow you to do them in a fairly large scale.
Does that make it worth bringing up the whole idea, or do you want to skip it, of DPO as kind of like a workaround?
I think, we are totally, and I just want to check it, okay, so she's still trying to get back in. Oh, no, there's Winston. You're back?
I'm here.
Okay, good. Winston is back. Good to know. And I'll pass it back to you in a sec, Winston. DPOs, direct public offerings, I think I'm totally keeping my eyes on them because I think that there's a possibility that they could become a real important tool for startup co-ops in the future. At this point, I haven't seen any co-ops really raise significant money. I've seen, like seed money style, $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 get raised, but I'm not seeing, and Jacqueline, if you've seen it, let me know, but I'm not seeing the multi-hundreds of thousands of dollars, the million of dollars.
There is one exception, and that would be Dorchester. They've done about 500,000 that way, and they're about to have another big push, but that's the only
Fantastic.
exception I know of.
Okay, so, do what they're doing, but also just keep your eyes on it. DPOs do have more costs involved with them. You are, I think you're required to use a organization that serves as kind of the agent for it. So there's more overhead, there's more paperwork. It also allows you to go outside of your ownership, but I think that's where, in order to make them valuable to your co-op, like we're not generally great at how we do these appeals outside of ownership because other forms of financing, we cannot go outside of our ownership. So there's a messaging challenge there. But I think DPOs are worth keeping an eye on. I wouldn't yet bet the farm on them. Okay, what else do you have, Jacqueline?
We got a lot. So we're going to jump back to Winston, though, because I think everyone wanted to hear the rest of Winston's thoughts.
Go for it. Yes.
Winston, we'd love to jump back. While you were gone, we were saying, hey, remember how we're always pushing on parking spaces? Like, that's not going to go away, plus outdoor space because of what you said. Did you have somewhere further you wanted to go with that? People were interested.
Yeah, I was thinking that you could build your space flexibly. Right now, you would probably have your curbside operation processing in your flex space. And then so you could continue to have a very high visible service offering right there in front of your community that helps elevate the volume of that service and the use of that service, because it's important that while you have staff there and you're paying the labor and you're reserving the space, that you are generating some sort of income out of that effort. So I think that you could build some small amount of flexible space, and then that flexible space really can come back to you. You could, book consultations with homeopaths or, movement specialists or do movement classes. I mean, I think flex space is important, but also you want to be fairly conservative. Like it will be a small use of your square footage. But I also saw that someone was asking about covering curbside service through donations, and I'm not aware of that. And even if you hire it out to Instacart, the way Instacart gets their money is they take it out of your margin. So they get 13 points on your package sales. They get a certain percentage, I can't remember exactly what, on your liquor sales. And so, I mean, that's half of your margin usually. And so it's extracted for the business as much as it's extracted for the gig worker. So if you can cover it through your own means and methods, that's important. I think another thing that we're not actually talking about here, but with the popularity of curbside service, it's really hard to remain distinct in your marketplace and make sure that what you offer as a co-op is of value and unique to your co-op shopper, that they're still getting a connectivity feeling, that they're still getting some sort of like mission out of what they're doing to support the co-op, because in all likelihood, as a startup, your pricing is going to be a little bit tough. Your services are going to be a little bit tough too, because you're still going to be learning to develop into a seasoned grocer. And so why would I buy my online groceries with our co-ops rather than go to Harris Teeter or Hy-Vee or some of these big box stores, Whole Foods, Instacart, via Whole Foods or Amazon? So remembering that even though it's an online curbside service, you're having either computer or phone conversation with your customer and they're not directly in your store, that you still have to make that service reflect the values and the commitment that the co-op brings to the community. And that's a tall order to fill, but your personnel is your main asset there. That they are putting little notes in the packaged groceries, and that they're allowing them to express their personalities through that service is a key component to doing it the co-op way.
There's a question I'm seeing here about saying more about that money is coming for redevelopment and how can co-ops capture these dollars locally. And these dollars, I think, are often separate from what your traditional capital campaign would be. These would be by building relationships with your city council, city manager, redevelopment organization folks, even the Chamber of Commerce, that there's going to be money flowing from a variety of sources into the community to support, to help rebuild blocks that have lost all of their retail tenants, and other ways to try to recapture some of the vitality within cities that have suffered greatly during this time. You want to be on those local folks short list. When they hear about the money, you want to hear about it. And the only way, if you wait until it's posted in the newspaper, that's not, it's better than never hearing about it, but ideally you want to be in the Rolodex of some of these local folks, so that if they say, hey, I hear there's going to be, $5 million coming into our city for this particular kind of redevelopment, that sounds right for you. You want to find that out early and get yourself prepared to capture, or to do whatever you can to capture that money early. And, some of it is just a hunch, but some of it is also looking at what the current administration has been doing. I think there will be more money coming out to help rebuild stores and downtowns and things like that. Yeah, Jacqueline.
I was gonna mention to you guys, some of you are direct messaging me with your questions, which I don't mind, but it makes it hard for Ben and Winston to interact with them because I have to cut in. So question that came up, Winston, back to the delivery thing, was we're seeing some co-ops are still, I think they mean open co-ops, are offering like food boxes. I think Willie Street's doing this. And your thoughts on that, if that's like a midpoint or if that's working for folks?
I think it's working really well, and I think that developing it going forward is a really key component to being it's a core service to your customer. Services like Blue Apron, let's say, this is a kind of an answer. That's a response to the popularity of those types of programs. I'm seeing more and more programs coming out of diet or fitness programs that are very much like, here's your food for the week. You don't have to mess with it at all. So meal kits and CSA boxes and produce grab lots. There's lots of different ways to promote and make theme appeals to, and it's primarily focused out of your prepared foods department, but your produce managers are also getting in there and making sure that they're providing good value to your customer and getting the produce turns up there. So yes, there's a lot of demand for that service, because even though we all had to go back and kind of isolate and eat our own cooking, we didn't necessarily become fabulous cooks overnight. So and people change. There's the keto demands, there's changing in what you want to emphasize as you move through the different stages of life. And so I think focusing those kinds of kits for, are you trying to be more active? Are you trying to like watch your carbs, watch your sugar, all of these other things? There's a lot of demand for it because, like I said, we don't necessarily know how to eat well. We know what we don't know sometimes, and these programs can be a real benefit to the people that use them.
And the second part of the question was, are these programs less of a money sink compared to online ordering? What do you think?
Yeah, because you can plan them. Online ordering is completely unpredictable. I don't know if you're going to order this box of cookies or that, but I can tell you comes with a box of cookies, and I'm the one selecting that box of cookies and putting it in that bag. And I know I selected it because it was at a great price to me, or because it's highly popular and it's going to draw focus to my program. Yeah, anytime that I'm making decisions, I'm a whole lot more comfortable, I'm more profitable, I'm more efficient, I'm systematic. Yes, those programs are more profitable.
I want to just point out a great illustration of what I was trying to describe earlier. So you all who are here today on this, what do we call these things? Zooms. Um, Dave Swanson responded to somebody about a question they had relating possibly fairly specifically to Wisconsin co-ops. Dave is an amazing person, a co-op rock star. And by being here, you've been exposed to him. And if you happen to be working on a co-op in Wisconsin, you just got some very valuable information at no cost right here. This is what building relationships can get you. It gets you information early and information at a lower cost than other folks, and I don't mean other grocery stores, I mean like, a lot of people are going to want to open businesses again when things start opening up. You want to be there early and informed and with the relationships established. So to me, it was just great to, thank you, Dave, for that great information, but also thanks for being here. And all of you get to know Dave. He's a good guy, and get to know other people like Dave, both in the co-op industry and in your local communities.
I have watched you guys.
And yeah, I'll say I learn a lot from these sessions too.
We love having you here.
So do
and you guys come to these sessions and actually meet each other from other co-ops, and I see you go end up like all over each other's Facebook pages and really up everyone's views. Like, it works, these connections that the men's talking about all over the place. Winston, I have to bring us back because there's a whole conversation going on over here. People want to talk about community kitchen space inside the co-op and letting people lease it and that sort of thing. What have you seen? What are your current thoughts?
I've been in that situation a couple of times. The challenge there is that you don't have a lot of labor. Labor is getting more and more expensive, and it's competitive. It's a little bit of a dogfight to get talent into your co-ops. And so these programs require administration. You have to book them. You have to make sure the kitchen is ready and clean and safe. And that's going to take labor. So you have labor to administrate, you have labor to clean, you have labor to explain to the customer what's going to go on. You also have people that then come to use the kitchen in that scenario, and they're in your parking lot. And we know that you don't have a lot of parking. So I think it's tricky. It's a great asset, and it's a great mission. A co-op that I'm aware of is working with a 501c3 in their community to have them administrate the space, which I think is, I'm really crossing fingers. I hope that works well. I think they'll market it, they'll manage it, they'll bring in the resources that the users might need in order to use that kitchen safely and to get the outcome that they're hoping for. But yeah, there in Madison, there's a kitchen called Feed Kitchen. And if you're interested in providing incubator commercial kitchen space, I would contact them potentially to see what kind of information they can give you.
And I know too, this is where being savvy comes in also, where, if your co-op is going to have a kitchen, you're also most likely going to have a kitchen manager and staff who want that kitchen to be exactly the way they left it when they arrive every morning. And they may be arriving at 3 a.m, depending on whether there's baking or other things going on. So rather than try to add these services that are great into your own kitchen, like every church in pretty much every town has a kitchen. Create relationships. The co-op will still get the substantial benefit of saying, we pioneered this food incubator in concert with this other organization, but you don't have any of the overhead or concern of management of it. You're on your own. So look for those opportunities, create those relationships, see where you can create, double win situations. Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely misunderstood the question. It never occurred to me that you would rent out your own in production dedicated kitchen to outside users. You should never. I would never do it. It's the health inspector and having surprise inspections, and then all of a sudden you've got somebody's tuna fish sandwich half eaten in your cooler, and you can't explain how it got there, how long it's been there, and so forth. Like, it would just be so burdensome to your staff to get the kitchen cleaned up after non-professional uses, that as your general manager, I would have I'd have a real challenge trying to make it work.
They are clarifying that they were thinking dedicated space. I mentioned the PFC experiment because they're still doing it. It's been done by the only ones I know nationally. I actually think the real trend nationally with these kinds of kitchens is they fail. The vast majority of them fail. So I just want to make clear, like, I am not advocating for these. It's the one example I know of a food co-op that has at least seems to be successful enough. They haven't gotten rid of it through using a nonprofit partner, but they were talking dedicated kitchen.
They are really expensive spaces to not be generating, you know, revenue per square foot from.
We just put a teaching kitchen in a space, and then the hood alone was $130,000. So when we say expensive, we're not saying, you know, $40,000 or $50,000 worth of expense. We're talking a big chunk of your budget.
Yeah, and I don't want us to get too lost here, so thank you guys for giving that input. I just knew it had to be talked about because the conversation was starting to go. But let's look at some other angles. I think there was a question here. Ben, this is kind of a you question. Shirley wanted to know, is there anything the board can be getting prepared or doing now for preferred shares before getting a lawyer involved?
Yes, and that's a fantastic question. I saw that there. Yeah, absolutely. I think beginning to do some of your own research. I mean, you're always going to have to get a lawyer involved. You're not going to avoid that, but beginning to understand, you know, Googling it, looking at your state information about what might be involved or what are the potential limits, creating relationships with local lawyers or, you know, national lawyers, whoever works with you. One things that we did in our co-op here locally was we went to other co-ops and said, who's your lawyer? So we went to the agricultural co-op, we went to the credit union, and we eventually started using the same lawyer as the credit union used. She knew the cooperative law in our state, and she was also willing, you know, to have some conversations at a little to no cost beforehand that weren't truly legal prep, but she was able to answer some questions like you might have around what should we be doing to get ready for a preferred shares offering. Also, building relationships in your community with other, you know, look for the people who know a lot of other people. So I think religious leaders, people, you know, pastors, rabbis, imams, they often know a lot of people. And if you build relationships there, they can help connect you with the people who can buy substantial numbers of your preferred shares. Building those relationships throughout your community, so that, you know, your Rolodexes also becomes a valuable resource for folks, but also when you're ready to roll it out, you know who to call to get the ball rolling. Those are all really good things. And get yourselves ready, you know, whether you have some or very little means, you know, do you want to consider a home equity loan if you're able to do that? Do you want to just start putting aside money now so that you can purchase shares when they become available? So kind of getting yourself financially ready too.
We got time for about one more question. If someone, and I haven't seen anything pop up in the chat, and I've got one more for Winston if no one else does, but I'm gonna give you a second. Like, if you guys want to throw it over there. Okay, so interesting, you mentioned, you know, freezer's back, and I've been around long enough to see it come and goes. And one of the questions we're hearing from a lot of folks, I love your insight on, is what's going to happen is the importance of prepared foods in deli going to grow, shrink? What's going to happen with that post-pandemic?
I think you're going to have to watch your community, but I think, like I said, I think it's going to snap back. I think it's going to be a very high demand category, and it's takeaway, not eat in.
Do you see hot bars, cold bars, salad bars coming back, or is that a place that maybe startups shouldn't invest?
I would be very conservative in my investment, but it's hard to be conservative because they are expensive piece of equipment that takes infrastructure to support. And so it's kind of like you're all in, or you should wait and hang back until you're gonna and see what the customer does. But the theories that I've heard is that it's almost going to be like a kind of a roaring 20s kind of a response of like, once the lid is off, the lid's all the way off.
People are going to party. Yeah.
And, you know, the amount of luxury spending, if you will, elective spending, is going to increase once people have employment again too. You know, that's all going to connect to Maine, that there's probably your staple ingredient categories are going to be pretty flat. Like we'll see bulk come back, but it's not going to be like an exciting, innovative category. But I think your prepared foods, things that people can put in the car and go, you know, your roasted chickens, your salads and just, yeah, hot food in particular, just running in, grabbing a hot sandwich, grabbing a hot meal, grabbing those casseroles. So like combi ovens, I think are going to be in everybody's lineup because they're a great piece of equipment for heating up, you know, enchilada casserole and all these other like complex dishes. There's also the thing, one of the nice connectivities here, unfortunate but nice for co-ops, is that because of the challenges to the restaurants and the fact that the restaurants have faltered, there's a lot of talent out there. So connecting with that talent and making sure that you're recruiting talented prepared foods managers and prepared foods producers is something that you can be doing right now.
Can you say the name of the kind of oven again? There was a request. Combi.
A combi, C-O-B-I. It's a combination of
Good.
steam and radiant heat.
Okay. All right. Well, I don't want to use anyone's time here, so I'm going to say we're going to wrap up. If the speakers, and I did not get a chance to ask my time, are willing to stay a little after, answer a few more questions, sometimes they are, so you can hang up. Okay, Ben can. So
I cannot. I've got a bookended a meeting. Sorry.
Totally
It was nice to meet everybody.
All right. So we're going to go ahead and stop at the top of the hour here. Thanks again, everyone. If we can give a round of applause to Ben and Winston for donating their time to be here today to share their experience. We really appreciate it. And the email will be out about the rest of the series coming up tomorrow. And with that, I'm going to stop recording. And if anyone wants to stay and ask Ben a few more questions, please feel free.